Today I'll be reading the introduction for Marxist Leninist Perspectives on Black Liberation and Socialism by Frank Chapman. Let's begin. The Communist International breaks once and for all with the traditions of the Second International, which in reality only recognize the white race. The task of the Communist International is to emancipate the workers of the whole world. In its ranks are fraternally united men of all colors, white, yellow, and black, the toilers of the entire world. This book is about the historic relationship between two great revolutionary struggles, the struggle for black liberation and the struggle for socialism in the United States. Before these movements deliberately and consciously joined under the guiding hand of the Communist International, there were continuous opportunities for joint struggles against the capitalist bosses, going back to the First International during the Civil War in the decade that followed. So, what we propose to do in this book is trace the history of these developments going back to chattel slavery and coming up to the post-World War II period and the emerging civil rights movement and its ramifications for setting the agenda for a new stage in the black liberation movement. All the while, our focus will be on the role that the Communist Party played or didn't play in these developments. The time is long past due for us as Marxist Leninists to make a serious study and assessment of the historical relationships between the struggles for black liberation and socialism. It is one thing to say that communists never opportunistically took advantage of the question of national or racial oppression, and quite another to demonstrate this based on the historical record. Just because the question can be raised in simple terms doesn't mean that it can be answered in simple terms. What we aim to do in this book is focus on the Communist Party and its relationship to the struggle for black liberation. In doing so, we start from saying Marx's premise that labor cannot be free in a white skin if it is sold and branded in a black skin is part of the revolutionary essence of Marxism. The moment the Communist Party emerges in history, it is a testament to the development of a class-conscious working class that sees the necessity of workers of the world uniting in the fight against capitalism. Simultaneously, this movement recognizes that racism and national chauvinism are impediments to the development of class consciousness and therefore must be removed from the path of progress. Marx and later Lenin and Stalin did not confuse the national question with the question of race. Fighting against racial prejudice is not a revolutionary struggle per se. Fighting against national oppression is a revolutionary struggle. In this book, we show how these distinctions developed historically by clearly demonstrating the formation, evolution, and application of Communist Party policies to the oppression and the struggle for liberation of black people in the United States of North America. There have been two outstanding pioneering works on the formation and evolution of Communist Party USA policies with regard to black people. One is American Communism and Black Americans, a documentary history 1919 to 1929 by Philip Foner and James S. Allen. The other is The Cry Was Unity by Mark Solomon. These books were written and edited by communist scholars and one communist theoretician, James Allen, and they focus sharply on the theoretical and practical contributions communists made from 1919 through 1934 for the struggle for black liberation. For me, these books are a goldmine of facts and profound Marxist analysis. This book, however, sets forth and reiterates the thesis originally formulated by Lenin and embraced and developed by Stalin. And that is that the revolutionary content of Marxism-Leninism lies precisely in seeing this centrality of the national question in the struggle against imperialism, in the struggle for socialism. As Marxist-Leninists, we believe that revolutionary theory is always confronted with the task of answering the most urgent questions posed by the oppressed peoples and the working class in their struggle against the dehumanizing conditions of capitalism. In U.S. history, there have been two great revolutionary struggles: the communist-led struggles of the workers' movement for an end to exploitation and to eliminate all oppression, and the struggle of the oppressed nationalities for equality and liberation. There have been in our various groups that consider themselves revolutionaries that claim to stand with the struggle for black liberation. This book is not about them. It's about Marx and the First International, the Third International, and the Communist Party USA, and the legacy they have left us with on this all-important question. In this book, we are lifting this legacy up because we believe there are lessons to be learned and scientific principles to be applied in rejuvenating the black-red bond, the fusion between black liberation and class struggle. There are many national liberation struggles inside the border of this country. Most importantly, those of the indigenous peoples who have been dispossessed of their land, forced to live on reservations, and oppressed while being denied their sovereignty. There are the people of the Southwest who developed as the oppressed Chicano nation after the U.S. conquest in the war with Mexico. There are also the colonized people of Puerto Rico, as well as other oppressed peoples inside the United States, Asians, Arabs, and Latinos. However, while acknowledging and standing in solidarity with the national liberation movements, this book focuses on how the Communist International identified the struggle for black liberation as being strategically central to the struggle for working class consciousness and socialism in the US and Africa, especially in South Africa. These two movements, the workers' movement and the black liberation movement, emerged separately in the 1800s when Marx and Engels were developing the theory of scientific socialism. It is common knowledge that under their leadership, the socialist movement applied itself to the task of the workers' movement here. It is less well known, but it is also the case that the struggle for freedom for black people was central to Marx's analysis of the United States. Marx was the first to discover the law of primitive accumulation of capital in the development of industrial capitalism, showing that the African slave trade was the foundation of mercantile capitalism. Marx gave attention of the first order to the role of slavery in the rise of capitalism as a system. He also understood quite clearly that the overthrow of the slave owner of the American South was an indispensable precondition for the development of class consciousness among white workers. While this book can and should contribute to the building of a Marxist-Leninist political party that stands unconditionally for the aims of the black liberation movement, this book is not about that. Nonetheless, it is our hope that this book will contribute both theoretically and practically to developing a sound Marxist-Leninist grounded program on black liberation in particular, and national liberation in general. We are not studying here the resurgence of the black liberation movement. However, we believe and hope that this book will help connect the revolutionary traditions of the past to those of the present. If we succeed here in demonstrating that Marxism-Leninism is a tool that we as revolutionaries must bring to the new movement, then we shall be happy. Marxism-Leninism as a body of theory and practice captures the lessons of the worldwide revolutionary movement, including a century of the struggles of oppressed nations for liberation from imperialism. It puts forward that only a socialist revolution led by multinational, multiracial working class party guided by the revolutionary science of Marxism can end racist and national oppression, and that revolution in the US means overthrowing the system of imperialism or the monopoly capitalists. The main point we want to make is that history has demonstrated that when the party liquidates the national question and refuses to see and fight for the centrality of the struggle for Black liberation, the revolutionary movement as a whole suffers. Therefore, we must build the party in the crucible of struggle, striving for a united, multiracial, multinational working class that stands in unconditional solidarity with those struggling against racism and national oppression. We believe that the US revolution is distinct from some other revolutions in advanced capitalist countries. Here, the multinational working class can't free itself unless it rejects racism and builds unity with the national liberation struggles. And the oppressed nations can't end national oppression unless they unite with all workers to overthrow capitalism. This strategic alliance at the core of a united front against the monopoly capitalists is the only path of struggle capable of putting an end to this hated system. Winning, that is victory, will require the merger of these two movements. A note on Black Marxism and the Black radical tradition. This book is not about Black liberation as a state of mind that can be characterized as Black Marxism or the Black radical tradition. Nonetheless, I think that there is an ideological need to settle accounts on this question of identity of the Black radical tradition and Marxism. My initial response to the formulation Black Marxism is that it is unscientific. And then I read this from the introduction of Cedric Robinson's book, Black Marxism, The Making of the Black Radical Tradition. Start of quote. This study attempts to map the historical and intellectual contours of the encounter of Marxism and Black radicalism, two programs for revolutionary change. I have undertaken this effort in the belief that in its way, each represents a significant and imminent mode of social resolution, but that each is a particular and critically different realization of a history. The point is that they may be so distinct as to be incommensurate. At issue is whether this is so. If it is, judgments must be made, choices taken. End of quote. If this is the first order of business, then according to Robinson, Marxism and Black radicalism must be examined and cross-examined from two different standpoints. Namely, one, Marxism from the standpoint of its profound but ambiguous indebtedness to Western civilization. And two, Black radicalism from the standpoint of the very circumstances of its appearance has required that it be misrepresented and diminished. In other words, Robinson sets out to demonstrate to us by way of scholarly investigation whether or not Marxism and Black radicalism are commensurate. Somehow, we subject that through this particular construction, we will come to understand how the making of the Black radical tradition is related to Black Marxism. Well, Robinson doesn't waste time. He offers up his conclusion before the proof in the outline to the construction of, in his study, summing up the better part of 2 centuries of the intellectual left of Europe opposing capitalist class rule. Robinson makes a number of assumptions regarding the works of Marx, Engels, and Lenin. However, the assumption I wish to speak on is his first one. Robinson's first assumption, Marxism, was founded on the study of the expropriation and exploitation of labor taken up by Engels, and later elaborated by Marx's materialist theory of history. His recognition of the evolving systems of capitalist production and the inevitability of class struggle. However, Marxism as a doctrine was partially founded on the study of capitalism as a system of expropriation and exploitation, or what Lenin called British political economy. As a doctrine, according to Lenin, Marxism emerged as a direct an immediate continuation of the teachings of the greatest representatives of philosophy, political economy, and socialism. How does one even begin to understand Marx's materialist theory of history if one doesn't recognize that historical materialism came about as a result of Marx and Engels settling accounts with German ideology, French socialism, and English political economy? In fact, Robinson avoids dealing with the sources and component parts of Marxism by simply declaring that Marxism is a Western construction, quote, a conceptualization of human affairs that is emerged from European peoples, mediated in turn through their social orders and their cultures. Certainly, the philosophical origins are indisputably Western, end of quote. Not really, for what emerged in Europe during the so-called Renaissance was passed on to them by the Arabs and Islamic culture dominant in North Africa and Spain, that is, mediated through the non-Western cultures of North Africa and the Moors. European people did not develop their culture in isolation, but in fact drew much knowledge from the more advanced non-Western cultures of Africa and the East. So rather than speaking specifically to the sources of Marxism as Lenin did, Robinson is saying Marxism is stamped with the certain inherent limitations due to it emerging from the historical experience of European peoples. But Marxism as a science is no more uniquely European, isolated from the high road of human civilization, than mathematics, medicine, and chemistry. Robinson's declaration is an abstraction because every idea or system of ideas is born in a particular culture at a particular time, and therefore reflects the economic system and social knowledge at the historical moment. Neither Marxism nor any system of social knowledge exists independently of social knowledge as a whole. This is especially true given the way civilization develops and interacts with one another. For example, Islamic culture in North Africa developed science and mathematics ahead of modern European states. Ibn Khaldun, a North African philosopher and scholar, was a pioneer in the development of the social sciences, and some of the same ideas that originated with him can be found in the works of Marx. The principal question here is, did Marxism provide humankind, and especially workers and oppressed peoples, with instruments of knowledge to be used in achieving liberation from class, race, gender, and national oppression? Our book gives a resounding yes to this question. Marxism and Black liberation are indeed historically related radical traditions that spring from the common soil of capitalism, but they are not of the same measure. The struggle for Black liberation is longer. There was Haiti in the Caribbean and Quilombo in Brazil before there were Robert Owen's utopian communes and the Paris Commune or the Great October Revolution. Yet the historical fact of the greatest importance is that Marxism recognized from its inception the emancipation of the working class is the emancipation of all humanity, and that so long as Black workers and the colonial and nationally oppressed are held in bondage, that white workers or workers as a class cannot be free. This is part of the revolutionary essence of Marxism. This revolutionary essence is what is missing with the utopian socialists, for whom the abolition of Black slavery was not a primary issue. And it is the revolutionary essence that was betrayed by the Second International or the Social Democrats. The Bolshevik Revolution reclaimed the revolutionary essence of Marxism and ended the era of socialism being wedded to the white national chauvinism of Europeans. The Manifesto of the Communist International of 1919 declared, quote, colonial slaves of Africa and Asia, the hour of proletarian dictatorship in Europe will strike for you as the hour of your own emancipation, end of quote. And so it did for that moment of history when the weakest link in the imperialist chain was broken, when for the first time in history the struggle for socialism and Black liberation merged in the international arena and became the spark for igniting the fires of rebellion of the 1960s and laying the foundation for black liberation and the struggle for socialism in the 21st century. That is what this book is about. If you enjoyed that reading, let me know what you thought in the comment section below. You can find this book on FRSO's website. Link will be in the description, and I hope to continue the next chapters.